and welcome to my video about maximizing English with younger learners. Teaching younger learners can be a bit tricky as their level is usually a bit more low than high schooler students or adult learners, so you have to adapt yourself to them. One of the reason you can do that is by modifying your speech rate, but also the language that you use with them. And there are also many strategies you can use in order to make sure use English as much as possible in the classroom when comes the time of teaching a grammar lesson, but also classroom management. To do so, you can use pictograms and many other strategies. I will talk about them in the video. To me, the first thing that has to change when teaching younger students is the speech rate. It's important to keep a natural flow when talking to your students. You don't want to start talking in slow motion because you might lose their interest, but also some of them will probably don't like it. Imagine you're a kid and some adult is talking to you like this. You won't ever encounter someone talking to you like that on the street. And an important element of C1, in my opinion, is to have real authentic conversations no matter the level of your students. So when I was talking to my students, I would use this flow of speech, which is, in my opinion, quite natural. Whereas with high schoolers, I tend to speak a little bit faster, just like this. But when I started teaching third and fourth grade, my flow naturally went a bit slower, and I didn't hesitate to ever repeat myself or just change also what I was saying. It makes the conversations a bit more long, but it's fine. It's important to take the time to discuss with your students and to give them the attention that they need in order to produce a good speech. So, speech rate, go a bit slower, you will be fine. Another key element to maximize your use of English with younger students is the language that you use in the classroom. You have to think about how you speak, like we saw with the speech flow, but you also have to think about what you are saying to your students. A first great strategy is to use functional language. It's a great tool that will help you easily communicate with your students. Right from the start of the school year, I introduced functional language to my third and fourth grade. I would start the class saying good afternoon or good morning, and then they would have to answer, "How are you, Miss Christa-Lyne?" And I will be, "Good, and you?" And then they will say, "Good, thank you." So we always start every class this way. This introduces to the students functional language that they know and understand. So it starts a conversation easily. Then it's really important to use the vocabulary that you see in class. You teach them the vocabulary so they know it. Use it as much as you can. And then, something that is really important is to avoid contractions when you are speaking. That was something that I struggled with at first. Well, actually, I think I did better than I think I would because when I was teaching in high school, I had ELA students, so English as Language of the Arts students. So they were really advanced. Some of them spoke better English than I did. And I would use a lot of, "Oh, I'm gonna do this, you're gonna do this," etc. Avoid this with primary level. You have to use the proper form with them. You are going to do so. You will have to do this. You are, not your, you are. You have to teach them the proper way of speaking. They are not advanced enough yet to be able to do the contractions, so they might get confused between, "Oh, is it your or you are? Why is she saying both?" So stick to no contractions with younger students. Another really important element that I use throughout all of my practicums are pictograms. So here you can see the in the English class poster that I made. So I created that on Canva and then I printed it. It was big like this. And then I sticked it on the desk in the classroom. So that is something that I would use a lot for classroom management. So let's say I have a student who is starting to disrupt the class. I will walk toward the desk and then point at the stop sign, meaning that was a warning. They all had three warnings, and then it would we would write something in the agenda or in the English passport. And but there are also other expected behaviors on the poster. So there is: I sit down, I raise my hand to speak, I am quiet, I listen, I work, and I read. I use all images that look the same because it's less confusing for the students that way. And I also try to make it more with more diversity because not all students look the same. So it's important, I think, that students relate to what they see for classroom management, because you don't want them to be like, oh, well, none of them look like me, so it won't apply to me. So it's important that all pictures look the same, but with keep in mind diversity, and make the font easily readable for the students. What I like about this is that the picture is really easy to understand, and there's the sentence underneath. So the student cannot say it doesn't know what it means because the picture is so clear to understand. Then underneath, you have a listen, read, quiet, relax, highlight, and warning. So once again, a warning sign comes back. However, the difference between those six and the other ones above are that the one underneath I printed, and then I put around a lanyard that I had around my neck. So I would walk around the classroom during work time and then point to the instructions if they were struggling to understand. So I always had my pictograms on me. Let's say I have a student who struggle to understand that they have to read a special part of the story, then I would put on my read pictogram with the cat reading, and I would like read, and then I would point at the cat reading, because I realized that what most of students didn't understand was not the text that was too difficult to read whatsoever. It was the instruction. A lot of them did not understand the instruction, so I created the linear solution with the pictograms to help with that. And if you look at the right, it says, what do you see? What do you think will happen? And what is your favorite color? So these are questions that I had before we had a reading. So we were discussing the book cover, and those were three discussions we had, questions, three discussion questions, I'm sorry, that we had. And as you can see, there are pictograms, but also I gave functional language so the students would be able to properly answer the question, because a lot of them were like, ah, ben, je sais pas comment le dire en anglais, but now they know how to say it in English. I'm giving them the prompt to formulate their whole answer. The only thing they have to understand is the question, and to do so, they have the pictogram. So, what do you see? We have the two eyes. What do you think? And then we have some character thinking about the question. And what is your favorite color? And then favorite color is pretty difficult to put into a drawings. So I put a little heart emoji that was bouncing around. So it's interesting to look at, but also they easily associate a heart with liking something. So this is a good mix of functional language that we mentioned earlier and also pictograms. Finally, there are many other various strategies that you can use to maximize your use of English with your younger students. To facilitate the classroom management, you should set up clear expectations right from the start of the year. And to do so, I believe it's okay to do it in French. So your students will, first of all, they will be less afraid of you, because a lot of them, if they think you speak only English, will be scared of you and they won't even try to speak with you. Then you will also avoid the, oh, but I didn't know or I didn't understand because it was in English. If you tell them in French, they know the expected behavior and it will be easier to manage in English down the line. Another strategy that is really useful is modeling. Modeling is really important, and if you see that your students are not understanding what you are saying, regarding instructions, don't hesitate to model and remodel and remodel if you have to. You can also ask another students to explain the instructions to the other students, preferably a student that is stronger than the others. So because they will speak an English that is at the same levels as the others, because it's a child also, just like the others are children, sometimes it's easier for them to understand. Also, creating a classroom environment that is a safe space is super important. You want your students to feel safe in their learning environment, so they are able to take risk, and they won't be scared to make any mistakes or to get laughed at by the others. You don't want that in your classroom at all. If your students feel comfortable taking risk, they won't use French as much. And finally, positive feedback. Something that I struggled with a bit was knowing when to give feedback during interaction with students. I would be scared to cut them off and that they wouldn't want to speak English anymore. So I always waited for the end of what they had to say, their story or whatsoever. And then I would correct them, or sometimes I would tip them off towards the right direction. Like, for example, if they would say, "Oh, I go to," and I will be, "You went? Oh, where did you go?" And stuff like that. So I would always redirect them towards the right direction without using French ever. So that was a great strategy that worked well for me, even though I was a bit stressed of how I would give my feedback. And I never did it in a negative way. I always try to stay positive. "Oh, it's great how you try to say this, but maybe you should say this next time." Or, "Oh, I know you know that word, we learned it last week, so you know it. Can someone help that student?" So this is something that can go a long way with your students. To conclude this video, I would say it's possible to create meaningful links with your students even if they are younger students. At first, I wasn't sure if I'd like to do high school or primary better, but I realized that you can create great links with your students even if they're younger too. To do so, you have to make sure that you can communicate in English with them easily and that they will understand you. So you have to use a lot of strategies for it to happen. I hope you enjoyed the video and that it helped you make maybe a better decisions on if you like high school better or primary better. But either way, you have many options and I'm sure it will be great.